Legacy. It's a word often spoken at funerals, carved into stone, remembered after someone is gone. But what if legacy wasn't about the end? What if it were about power in the present? In the UK, charitable estates hit a record 46,000 in 2024, setting the stage for billions to flow into causes by 2050. And across the Atlantic, in the US, retired generals and admirals over the age of 65 are proving that legacy isn't about the past, it's about building the future. This is the story of how older generations are rewriting what it means to leave something behind. Why legacy is being redefined. For centuries, legacy has been framed almost exclusively as inheritance, property, money, and assets quietly passed from one generation to the next. The emphasis was on family lines, on the transfer of wealth within blood ties, on maintaining dynasties of influence and security. A will was seen as a deeply private document, one last transaction between the living and the dead. But something is shifting. The definition of legacy is expanding, stretching far beyond the private walls of family estates. In the UK, charitable giving through estates has surged in recent decades. In 2024 alone, a record 46,000 estates included charitable bequests, signaling not only generosity, but also cultural reimagining of what legacy means. Projections suggest that by 2050, legacy income to charities will double, pouring billions annually into causes that serve the public good rather than individual heirs. The US is seeing its own quiet revolution. Older generations, particularly baby boomers, now approaching the later chapters of life, are beginning to view legacy less as the private transfer of wealth and more as a form of public responsibility. Instead of asking, "How much will my children inherit?" many are asking, "What can my estate do that the government, the market, or the system itself cannot?" When institutions are strained, whether it's hospitals overwhelmed with patients, affordable housing crises that never seem to resolve, or underfunded veterans care, individuals are stepping into the gap. What was once an afterthought in estate planning has become a vehicle for systemic change. Legacies are no longer just about preserving family fortunes. They are about rewriting the future for communities, for societies, and for strangers who may never know the benefactor's name. That's where our two stories begin. The UK's legacy boom. In 2024, the UK hit a record 46,000 charitable estates. That number isn't just statistics in a government ledger. It represents tens of thousands of deeply personal decisions, made quietly at kitchen tables or solicitors' offices, where ordinary people chose to make generous final gestures. Retirees, widows, and middle-class families are all rethinking what their last act of giving should look like. Instead of passing wealth exclusively to children or grandchildren, many are directing a portion towards schools, hospitals, hospices, wildlife groups, and community projects. Why now? The answer is layered. Demographics play a major role. The baby boomer generation, one of the wealthiest cohorts in history, is now entering its twilight years. Their estates are larger than those of previous generations. They've lived longer lives, and in those decades, they've also lived through sharper awareness of global crises, climate change, inequality, overstretched health services. With that awareness comes a question. What if my will could make a dent where the system has failed? Culture too has shifted. Charities themselves have reframed the act of legacy giving, making it simple, practical, and even celebrated. What was once an awkward afterthought is now a mainstream choice, baked into the fabric of estate planning. Would you consider giving in your will? Has become a familiar line, gently posed by schools, wildlife trusts, and medical research institutions alike. And it's working. We've seen a cultural tipping point, explains a legacy researcher at Remember a Charity. People want their story to outlive them, and they're realizing a bequest is one way to do that. The boom isn't about numbers, it's about stories. Thousands of final chapters, written with generosity as the plot twist. Veterans for Tomorrow? In early 2025, a coalition of retired US military officers gathered in Washington, D.C. Most were over 65. Many had pensions, estates, or retirement savings carefully planned for their families. But what drew them into the same room wasn't personal wealth. It was a shared sense of unfinished duty. After decades of service, these veterans weren't asking how their estates could preserve their legacies. They were asking how their legacies could preserve others. From that question came Veterans for Tomorrow, a legacy-driven fund dedicated to supporting younger service members through mental health programs, transitional housing, and educational scholarships. Its mission was simple but profound: to ensure no new generation of veterans slipped through the cracks. The catalyst for the movement was retired Brigadier General Thomas Ellison, age 72. At the launch, he pledged $5 million from his estate to seed the fund. His announcement heartfelt, unexpected, and backed by the weight of his own sacrifice, went viral overnight. News outlets covered it widely, veterans organizations amplified it, and suddenly a movement had momentum. Ellison framed his decision not as charity, but as continuity. "We fought for our country when we were young," he told the crowd, his voice steady but charged. "Now we fight for the ones who came after us. My estate isn't about me, it's about them." His words echoed beyond the ballroom, igniting a wave of pledges from other retired officers and rank and file veterans alike. Within months, hundreds had joined him, pledging a portion of their estate, some large, some modest, to build a collective safety net for the next generation. Veterans who once wore different uniforms and fought in different wars now found themselves united in one last campaign, turning private wealth into public duty. Legacy in motion. Across both Britain and America, one truth is emerging with striking clarity. Legacy is no longer confined to the quiet realm of remembrance. It has stepped into the realm of action. For generations, we thought of legacy as a story etched into memory, names on plaques, portraits in dusty halls, a family name carried forward. But the new wave of giving is showing us something different. Legacy is not static. Legacy moves, it breathes, it builds. Take Margaret in Birmingham. She lived a modest life in a modest flat. When she passed, her will directed that the flat be sold, and the proceeds given to a children's hospice. That was not a symbolic gesture. It was hospital beds, oxygen tanks, nurses' salaries, and nights of comfort for families in despair. Margaret did not leave a memory. She left action. Or consider Brigadier General Thomas Ellison. His $5 million pledge to Veterans for Tomorrow wasn't about his name carved into marble. It was about bricks and mortar for housing, about counselors hired for PTSD clinics, about scholarships written into the hands of young veterans trying to rebuild their lives. His legacy was not a photograph in a frame. It was roofs over heads, doors unlocked, futures reopened. This is the redefinition. Legacy is power that activates the moment it is given. Not a passive inheritance, but an engine. Not nostalgia, but transformation. Each bequest becomes less about how someone is remembered and more about what continues to be repaired, healed, and built because they lived. Legacy is action. It begins not in memory, but in motion. The emotional dividend. At its core, legacy giving isn't about institutions. It isn't about balance sheets, legal paperwork, or corporate branding. It's about people, the living connections between generations, and the emotions that ripple long after the money is gone. One of the greatest fears families have about legacy giving is that it will create distance. Parents worry that leaving a portion of their estate to charity might spark resentment among children. But research consistently shows the opposite. Far from feeling cheated, children of legacy donors often report pride, a sense that their parents stood for something bigger than themselves. Take the daughter of a UK donor who spoke about her father's will. "My dad didn't just leave me money," she said. "He left me a story. And that's worth more." That story, a hospice wing carrying his name, became part of the family's narrative, a point of pride passed down, just as surely as any heirloom. In the US, the emotional dividends are just as clear. Younger veterans speak of Veterans for Tomorrow, not in abstract terms, but in deeply personal ones. One Marine Corps sergeant, just 28, told reporters, "Knowing older vets are still looking out for us, it feels like family. Doesn't end when you leave the service." For him, the pledge wasn't just money in a fund. It was a continuation of the brotherhood and sisterhood forged in uniform. These stories underline the quiet power of legacy giving. It transforms wills into bridges. It turns inheritance from a private act into a shared narrative, binding families closer and extending the meaning of family beyond bloodlines. Legacy is not subtraction. Done well, it multiplies belonging. Scaling generosity. A single estate may change a school. One generous gift can renovate a library, fund scholarships, or keep the lights on for a struggling hospice. But when thousands of estates align with the same spirit of giving, that's when you see transformation at scale. That's when private wills begin to move public systems. And that's exactly the shift now unfolding. In the UK, legacy giving has grown from a niche tradition into a structural force. Analysts forecast that by 2050, legacy income will have doubled, pouring billions annually into charities. That kind of predictable long-term funding doesn't just help individual institutions. It reshapes the entire philanthropic landscape, making charities less dependent on short-term campaigns and more confident in planning decades. Imagine hospitals able to expand wings, knowing future income is secure, or conservation groups protecting endangered species, with financial stability measured in generations rather than years. Across the Atlantic, the US offers its own proof of scale. Veterans for Tomorrow, began with one retired general's pledge. Today, it has already pooled tens of millions from other estates. Those funds are not sitting idle. They are being converted into brick, mortar, and human support systems, housing complexes, counseling centers, scholarships, and job training programs. What started as a single estate has quickly snowballed into a model for veteran care that could rival, and in some cases supplement, government systems. Legacy, then, is not just personal. It is scalable, a lever that multiplies when enough people pull in the same direction. One bequest may tell a single story, but thousands of bequests aligned across a society begin to write history. The science of legacy? Why does giving matter so much in later life? Why do people on the threshold of their final chapters so often turn their attention outward? The answers don't come just from anecdotes or philosophy. They come from science. Neuroscience shows us the first clue. When people give, whether money, time, or estate gifts, the brain responds with what researchers call the helper's high. Dopamine and endorphins surge, producing the same neurochemical lift we associate with joy, love, and even euphoria. For older adults, whose social roles often shrink after retirement, this surge is more than pleasant. It is stabilizing, anchoring well-being, and combating loneliness. Giving, quite literally, lights up the brain. Psychology provides a second lens, the generativity effect. As people age, the desire to guide, mentor, or provide for future generations intensifies. Erik Erikson, the developmental psychologist, argued that this stage of life is defined by the tension between generativity and stagnation. To give, to teach, to provide, to leave a legacy is to resolve that tension in favor of meaning. Legacy giving is, in many ways, psychology in action, the will as a final love letter to the future. And then there is economics. Legacy giving is not just noble, it is efficient. Studies show that every pound or dollar left to charity multiplies in value when it ripples through communities. A gift to a hospice pays not only for care, but also for the jobs of nurses, suppliers, and maintenance staff. A bequest to a veterans fund circulates into housing projects, construction wages, and long-term stability that reduces government strain. The math is simple. Private estates become public engines. As Brigadier General Ellison once put it, we can't take it with us, but we can send it ahead. Proof in action. Already, the results of legacy giving are not theoretical. They are tangible. They are classrooms and clinics, lives touched in ways that statistics alone can't capture. In the UK, legacy donations in 2024 alone funded over 1,000 scholarships for students who otherwise might have abandoned their studies. They financed dozens of hospice expansions, giving families dignified final moments with loved ones. They powered major conservation projects stretching from the cliffs of Cornwall to the highlands of Scotland, protecting ecosystems for generations yet unborn. Each donation, rooted in a will, has translated into visible, lasting change. Meanwhile, in the US, Veterans for Tomorrow has proven the model works across an ocean. Within its first year, the fund launched housing programs in 3 states, offering stable shelter for homeless veterans. It opened mental health clinics in 2 others, giving younger service members a lifeline against PTSD and depression. And it awarded scholarships to Gold Star families, ensuring that the children of fallen soldiers could step into futures their parents never had the chance to see. But perhaps the most important story is not in what has already been achieved, but in what could be. If legacy giving follows the forecast and doubles by 2050, the potential is staggering. Billions of pounds and dollars could flow annually into education, healthcare, conservation, veteran care, and social infrastructure. What today feels like isolated success stories could, tomorrow, become systemic transformation, a reimagining of what private estates can do for the public good. Legacy giving is no longer a side note. It is a rising current, with the capacity to lift entire communities if enough people choose to join it. Living legacy. The greatest myth about legacy is that it begins after you die. That's a postscript, a final act performed in absentia. But in truth, the most powerful legacies don't wait until the funeral. They are alive, active, and shaping lives in the present. Take Margaret in Birmingham. Her modest flat was sold, her bequest delivered, and today the children's hospice she funded is already built. The plaque bearing her name isn't just a memorial, it is a door that parents walk through, holding the hands of sick children who will receive care because she chose to act. Margaret's story is not about death, it is about lives made possible. Or consider Brigadier General Thomas Ellison. His pledge to Veterans for Tomorrow sparked a movement, and already the fund is building housing, launching clinics, and opening scholarships. Ellison didn't create a memory to be admired after his passing. He created a mechanism, alive in real time, that is giving young veterans a second chance at stability, health, and purpose. His legacy is not waiting in storage, it is already working. This is the deeper truth. Legacy is not an ending, it is a continuation. It blurs the line between memory and action, between absence and presence. A will, a bequest, a pledge, these aren't just documents for the future. They are instruments of the present. They activate as soon as the ink dries, carrying the giver's intent forward into tangible change. Legacy, then, is living. It is not about how we are remembered, but about how we remain, in scholarships awarded, in hospital wings opened, in families housed. To give is not to leave behind. To give is to live on. The legacy economy. So where does this go? If the past few years have revealed anything, it's that legacy giving is no longer a quiet side note in estate planning. It is becoming a cultural force, and the trajectory points only upward. In Britain, the path forward is clear. As charitable bequests become normalized, we may see a tipping point, where it is unusual not to include a charitable share in a will. Imagine a future where entire sectors, hospices, universities, and conservation trusts are funded not by sporadic donations, but by a steady current of legacy income. This shift could insulate charities from the volatility of short-term fundraising, allowing them to plan for decades, even generations, with confidence. In America, the story could take a different but equally transformative route. Veteran-led legacy models, like Veterans for Tomorrow, may expand beyond military causes. Retirees, inspired by the example, could launch parallel funds for education, climate resilience, or healthcare. Suddenly, older generations are not simply beneficiaries of systems built long ago. They are the architects of new ones. Legacy giving becomes not just charitable but innovative, a laboratory for bold solutions. And globally, as lifespans lengthen, as wealth accumulates across aging populations, and as cultural norms shift toward responsibility over inheritance, we may enter what some call the legacy economy. Billions flare owing not into the hands of individual heirs, but into the bloodstream of ideas, funding research, stabilizing infrastructure, and fueling movements that shape the next century. In this vision, legacy is not the end of a life. It is the ongoing fuel for collective progress. The future of legacy giving, then, is not about what we leave behind. It is about what we set in motion. The numbers are staggering. The stories are personal. From 46,000 estates in Britain to one retired general's $5 million pledge in America. The message is clear. You're not done yet. Legacy is not the last chapter. It's the blueprint for what comes next. So here's the question. If you could write your legacy today, what would it fund? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you are inspired to think more deeply about your legacy, like this video. Don't forget to share with a friend so we can provide more stories of people rewriting the script of what it means to give back. Thanks for watching. Stay blessed and stay curious.